Tatsumi Oikalo. I'm your host, Mary Jane Oatman, with Gaia Gossip, one of the wonderful productions of her Many Voices Foundation. It truly is an honor and a privilege to join you today with a very special guest out of Morton, Minnesota, who serves as the Hemp Project construction manager for the Lower Sioux Indian Community. Also, very special opportunity because those of you that have been following the journey of Gaia Gossip and specifically the show that I get to air, I have really been drawing upon the matriarchal voices of our Indigenous community. So today, very special opportunity to be able to interview a phenomenal leader in his own right in the Lower Sioux Indian community, but also across Indian country. And I would be selling the story short if I didn't say across the world. It's been an inspirational journey for the work that my friend and colleague Danny Desjarlais from the Lower Sioux Indian community has been doing to restore safe, affordable, healthy, bio-based building homes out of a wonderful material called hempcrete. So we're going to talk a little bit about hempcrete today, but we're also going to talk specifically about Danny's role in his community as a young father, as a leader, and as a visionary that's building teams and definitely shifting spiritual energy for the next 7 generations. So, Danny, I appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule. I was watching the news over the weekend, and it was showing a listing of city by city, and Minnesota was on the list. It looked like as the coldest state. So, what kind of temperatures are you dealing with right now in Minnesota?
Well, thank you for that great introduction. We're actually dealing with some warmer weather this week. Last week it was 20, 30 below. This week it's about 30 above. So everyone's walking around with just a hoodie on and no jackets. And so we feel like it's a tropical heat wave. I don't know if you've ever seen Grumpy Old Men, the movie, but it's kind of how it feels. Everybody's walking around happy when it's above zero.
Well, I've had the opportunity to travel over to your community, never during the super cold seasons, but I am really excited about the upcoming hemp workshop that you have. When I shared it with some of our community members, they were a little trepidatious about the um, potential of there being sub-zero temperatures in January while you're hosting your workshop. But hats off to you for continuing that education, especially during a season when most people wouldn't think to be activated and deployed to a place like Morton, Minnesota. But you also hosted a pretty tremendous workshop, the first ever US based International Hemp Builders Symposium. So, can you just kind of share a little bit about what that was like, bringing the world to Morton, Minnesota for such a wonderful opportunity, and just some of the cool things that have come out of that workshop?
Yeah, the whole thing was just amazing. I'm still kind of like pinching myself in awe that it even happened and that it went over so well. To host an international event right here at Lower Sioux, which is a small reservation out in the middle of nowhere, and to get people to come from you know 20 different countries and 40 different states. It was just it was amazing. And I mean, we even heard that comment from people that were here saying, it's pretty amazing to get all of these people out into the middle of nowhere. And so just to get everybody here was pretty incredible in itself. But then all of the presentations and all of the different studies that have already been done around the world on these materials, and then to have everybody in the same room, these PhDs and presenting on these over a 3-day period. It was, I was walking around the room just like starstruck. All of these people are like my idols, and so it was like I said, I still have to pinch myself to tell myself that it even happened or that it was even a real thing. And so just very thankful, I'm very grateful that the hemp building community has really, opened up to us and taken a liking to us, I guess, and supported us in what we're trying to do here. I guess we're just trying to rebuild our community. And so it's kind of we're not really competing with anybody else in the hemp building space. And so it's easy for other people to take a liking to us because we're not, competing against them, I guess you could say. And it's kind of almost inspires them to do the same thing, and opens up some more doors or some more opportunities for them, um, just by, supporting us or coming and seeing what we're doing. So I think it was good for us and for everybody that came too. I think everybody that left here went away with something, whether it was a learning experience or, more knowledge. Everybody that I talked to afterwards, they all had really good words to say. So what did you think of it? You were here for it. You got to meet a lot of people from around the world, I'm sure. So
Well, I did get to make it to the grand opening and ribbon cutting ceremony of your event. And unfortunately, I didn't get to make it into the Hemp Builders Symposium. I was having major FOMO when I was looking at all the different pictures. But I remember during the ribbon cutting ceremony, as well as the hemp workshop that we attended with Old Pueblo Hemp Company, it was that same feeling of walking around just starstruck, seeing all of these innovators in building, but that camaraderie, I guess you will, is something that I really appreciate and embrace by what has inspired or been really uplifted by the community work that you guys are doing. Because as you mentioned, it's like, we're trying to rebuild our community. We're not trying to make necessarily a for-profit, multi-trillion-dollar industry. But at the same time, there's huge potential and opportunity for an economic development arm from what you guys are building. So I would I would say that to reaffirm that when you walk around and you feel that starstruck nature, don't ever sell yourself short that that's exactly what's happening within Indian country and beyond with the work that you do. I know that that's how I feel, and then having the opportunity to introduce your work to my family, that's exactly how my brother feels about you. Is like all starstruck, like Danny is, you're like Superman.
yeah,
Which I know.
that's
Like
funny.
it's hard to take so much flowers, I can imagine. But when you think about that walk that you have in your own community, that was something that was told to me very young by one of my basketball coaches. He's like, you walk like a duck, you quack like a duck. People are gonna think that you're a duck, and it was at a very pivotal time for him to tell me this because sports was like everything to me when I was younger. And so I think about that journey, about that one, impactful adult saying something to me at a very pivotal time in my life in this role in hempcrete. You've shared a lot, actually, and I've been really lit up to know that you had past leaders that have kind of done that kind of work for you in the walk that you've had, specifically around hemp. Can you just share a little bit about the legacy planning and project work, because the leadership in tribal communities, it's always so important to get that buy-in from leadership, but when you have leaders actually come to you and tell you and kind of give you a charge, just share a little bit about how you were inspired in the wide world of bio-based building, from mentors and people in your community.
Yeah, well, I mean, it takes a full team to make anything really work, especially something like this. But it all starts with a vision, and Earl Pendleton, he's my hemp dad in all of this. He was preaching the hemp gospel for years before it was even legal, and really got everybody fired up about it. A lot of people were naysayers, um, and he brought me to this um, U.S. Hemp Building Summit down in Austin, Texas, and I got to meet a lot of the top hemp builders in the country there, even some from around the world, and that was like my aha or my light bulb moment was going to that, and I consider that the first day of the rest of my life, and I still do. That was around 5 years ago, and Earl was that reason. He was the one that brought us down there. He brought myself and another member that's still on the hemp crew, Robert. He brought us down there, and basically, opened our eyes to the hemp building world, and then brought us back here. And that's when the gears really started going, and the wheels started turning on this. And the rest is history, really. I mean, there's so much more to it. So many more people played pivotal parts in there. There's our housing department and all of the other people within the community and departments that are in a tribal government that have to make things happen for any type of funding to happen or anything like that. And so there's huge group effort. But Earl, it's his vision. It's still his, this is still his thing. He's not on the tribal council anymore, but we're still pushing this dream through. We're still pushing this vision through, because we all see what's come of it already, and what we see the potential of what's to come, and what it can be for others as well. And Earl always said that from the beginning. Even before we ever had our first house, he was on the way back from Ketchum, Idaho, from a hemp building workshop the year before he brought us. And he was driving through some of them forest reses, and went through, Pine Ridge and Rosebud, and seen a lot of the housing, and he was saying, man, we need to start building with hempcrete. We need to bring it to these other reservations. And he always had this dream of, once we figure it out, we're going to go build this house for free, for a different res. And we're going to make this film about it. And he always just had these, ideas. And this was a long time ago. He was always talking about these ideas, and so to now see them coming to fruition, and being able to, now that we know this material and we can take it to another reservation, we don't have the funding yet to where we can just go start building houses for free. I'm fingers crossed that that's still on the way. But we're ready, and that's our goal now, is to really, push this vision through, whether it's here on our reservation or other communities. It doesn't even have to be a tribal community. Really, any underserved community, we really think this could benefit them. And so we're taking Earl's vision and pushing that through, really. And so, and it goes along with a lot of other leaders. There's a lot of other tribal leaders outside of our community. Alex White Plume is one that, I read a story about Alex White Plume back in a High Times magazine back in the early 2000s. And it talked about, this hemp material that he was building with and whatever, and it, they even burned down his crops and all kinds of stuff, and so there's other, tribal leaders that have been doing it. And, Winona LaDuke, she's, a lot of people consider her to be, the hemp pioneer. And so there's all these, it's not like we're the only ones doing it, and so we do get a lot of, attention. And, in the Patagonia film, I had made the comment about the green buffalo, and I've even had some negative comments come towards me saying, oh, well, I called it the green buffalo, or I was the first person to say that. And I was like, well, I've never said I was the first person to say that. I'm just saying, I think that's a great thing. Whoever said it first, I think it really is a plant that we can be using for everything, from medicine to shelter to clothing. So I'm not trying to compete with anybody. I think everybody should be using this, and I'm just hoping to inspire others to do that. So, Earl set out the vision for us, and now we're just pushing it through. And so, and it still takes the current leadership. Obviously, they have to continue to buy into it. And that's a real big thing, with tribal government, tribal leadership. It changes out so often that you really can't build up this momentum. And if you do, it almost gets cut down if a new tribal council comes in. Whereas our leadership, they see the potential in it too, our current leadership. And they could have came and pulled the plug on this once Earl wasn't in the tribal council anymore, and they never did. So so hats off to them as well, and for them to continue to do that. I think it takes a selfless, and there's a lot of egos when it comes to tribal council, and for them to put their egos aside and to continue this work, I think it just shows how, the potential of what it can do to a community, and bringing that why to a young group of men that want to see their community, do better or be better. I mean, that's my ultimate takeaway and my favorite thing about everything that we're doing here. Take the hemp, take everything out of it. It's that we're giving this group of guys, community members, this job and this why, and they're going out and they're crushing it, and no, not one of them ever calls in sick. Nobody ever shows up late. Most of them stay longer, that we have to kick them out of here at 40 hours at the end of the week, and so it's really just seeing all of that myself is just really been like life changing, I think, and I think it can be that same thing for other communities. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Well, our elders definitely play such a huge role in this work. And so to be able to have that elder advisor, type of network to carry it forward is really important. That's also where we see a lot of no's happen if our tribal elders are not going to lean into it or embrace it. So I would imagine that it took a lot of education, but that's just on the hemp building side. Can you just share a little bit on the farm side and the work that Joey and his team are doing? Like, was there a lot more fear, I guess, from your tribal community? Just with the colonial impacts of what has happened to our relative plant, and being subjugated to being a Schedule One drug has created a lot of gaps in the many uses and utility of the plant, to our elder population, specifically in our tribal communities. They just know the traumas from, the criminalization, things that, that those stories that were reflected in that article on Alex in High Times
mhm.
for growing a plant. The threat, the fear, my own grandma and grandpa going to federal prison for growing a plant here in Idaho. So is that something that is still a concern in your tribal community, or how did you kind of have that over the top moment with the seed and cultivation side of things in your community?
Yeah, so I mean, we had it was mainly naysayers, and I can't say I'm probably speaking more for Earl at this point and whoever was on tribal council with him at the time, when they were first started growing the hemp. That was before any of us, the building crew, was hired. They decided to start growing, and I remember, just being a community member, all of the pushback that they would get from it, and even once we did start growing it, the first few years, there was a lot of people mad about it. Even like some of the people I knew in the community, I would hear them gripe about it. Well, how come I'm not over there doing it? That's mainly what people are mad about, is they're not involved with it. And so, most of the people are just going to be mad just to be mad. Um, and there was all of that pushback. Why are we growing drugs? I even heard somebody say, we have enough drug addicts on the reservation, why are we adding more to it? So there was just that misinformation and lack of education to know what industrial hemp actually was, and to be able to separate the two from medicinal cannabis to industrial hemp. um, and I don't think they were even willing to want to be educated. And so there was really nothing Earl could do, other than just keep going forward with this plan and build this house, or build this first demonstration building, or whatever the first plan was. Once we did finally get the demonstration building built, it still, it didn't like change people's minds. But then that following summer, we got our first house actually built, and then we opened it up to everybody in the community to come take a look at it. And most of the people that came to look at it were the naysayers, because they wanted to see the failure or whatever. And it really, like, a lot of them, you could even see it when they walked in. A few of my mom's friends that were really against the hemp stuff, I mean, they were like huge smiles when they walked in, and they were asking, when are you going to build us a house now? And so it was really, that was like the changing moment, was when they were in an actual house and they could touch it and see it and smell it and walk through it. Then that was when they were like, holy cow, this is a house made out of hemp, basically. And we grew it. And, it was just like so many things that were probably, changing to yeses, and like, holy cow, they just seen it. I don't want to call it like light bulb moments for them, but at least they were coming around. And so then that was, if we could go back in time, maybe we should have almost just built the building first, and we could have gotten all of that support right away from the community and from outside funding sources. Because even that too, like when we were out looking for funding sources, and we were reaching out to the USDA, and we had Zoom meetings with them, anytime they would hear the word hemp, like everything would get thrown out, so we had to start going away from the word hemp and start using like bio-based insulation or natural building materials, and we just wouldn't use the word hemp. So it's just that stigma, that just follows it, I guess, that really just, I think it still affects it in other communities, because we have so many tribal communities that come to us now. They want to take tours. They'll send their tribal council, or they'll send their housing department or their economic development team or whoever it is. And we've had so many of them come for tours. And I hear the same thing. Their elders ask, well, we don't want to grow hemp, or they're just against it. And so I think it was a big uphill battle for Earl and whoever was on tribal council at the time. But once we actually started to have some things for them to see, then it started changing some minds, and now we have, a cannabis dispensary. And so, hemp is the least of their worries. So, but just getting over that hump, it took some years. I remember, it was actually quite a few years for them um, to actually like see the light, I guess, at the end of the tunnel, you could say, or something like that. But and not everybody is fully bought into it. Obviously, you're not going to be able to please everybody. There's always going to be people mad about something, and right at the beginning when we were talking about just trying to rebuild our community, we wish this was like $1 million, this was some multi-million-dollar business plan that we have going on, but it's not. We're just getting by. We're just doing the projects as we go. And I guarantee you, anybody else that is in the hemp space or hemp industry, they'll tell you it's not the money making space. So really, I mean, it is a little bit of labor of love, but to see what it do for the community, I think where the other community members will buy in. Because if you're looking to get rich, you should probably look somewhere else.
Well, I can imagine, folks that have been on the ground floor of building out an emerging entire new industry would understand, which is why the education as well as the PR work that you guys have done I know it has made great strides in the awareness just around hemp as a bio-based building material and all of the many benefits that come with that. So the partnership that you all did to produce the Green Buffalo film has really helped us in the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association and other hemp communities in that education process. It allows us to take just from that one film the impact of the number one need that most tribal housing communities have to spring that forward. And the other part, I think, of that is, being able to bring in heavy hitters like Governor Walz to come in and, put his moccasins on the ground and have, Minnesota Public Radio and a lot of news networks interested in what you are all doing at a local level. Which then kind of carries out to the national level because people ask, where's all the hemp activity going on? And I said, oh, I know. And I get to share the story about my first time, stopping in when you guys were building the domestic violence shelter emergency duplex. That was when I had my probably most impactful moment. And I'm trying not to get emotional about it, but my life changed that day. When I was driving back home to Idaho, I could not unsee what you were all doing, and it was so many different impacts that happened that day. But I think probably one that I don't talk about a whole lot was when I had the opportunity to do an interview with your son Jesse,
Mm-hmm.
and he shared so much. But to see the pride, how happy he was to be a part of what his dad was doing, um, it made me realize that's the power of what's happening here is this intergenerational journey reshaping for our young people. But then I also see that, through watching the film Green Buffalo, which I encourage everyone to seek out and watch. It could be an hour long full feature. That 20 minutes of impact sometimes just doesn't feel like it's enough because you get to see the why. in that film, you see exactly the why. You get to see, Mel and Jesse and Robert and you and all of the community out there just, reinvigorating something, planting seeds for those next 7 generations, for Jesse and all of his friends to know like there's a pathway for us and we don't have to, follow the same white picket fence, American dream debt that most people have had to buy into. So I think of, all of these things that we are always told as we're going along our journeys of what not to do. And you're opening up a new pathway for not just the Lower Sioux Indian community youth, but youth across the country. And that's one thing that I have noticed. Can you share a little bit about how and why you guys decided to take some of your education programs into the local schools? Because I think that that's a very pivotal moment. When people say you can't teach old dog new tricks, I actually don't think that that's true either. But share a little bit more about why your education impact with youth has and what has translated from that work that you guys do in youth community.
Yeah, I'll probably make some people mad, but I do kind of feel that same thing about the can't teach an old dog new tricks. No, I don't think it's fully true. I think you can. Some people are open-minded, but for the most part, especially in the building industry, most people are pretty set in their ways and they don't like change, or they don't want to like to have to learn new things. Whereas, the kids, they're already learning all kinds of stuff in school. And so they're like more open to it. So when we go and talk to these kids at these schools, I mean, the questions are amazing. They're the best questions we get. When we talk with the older groups and stuff like that, it's the same questions, and they're really not even very good questions. They're really just super basic questions. Whereas the kids, their brains are actually, like really buying into it and really, thinking of the next things like, oh, well, we could do this, or why aren't we doing that? And so it's just I really love it going into the schools. And so every year we go and we talk with the it used to be called careers classes when I was going to the high school here, but we go in there and it's with all of the juniors and seniors, and then we talk about just not just about hempcrete, but we talk about how we got into these roles. And you don't have to go through college, a 4-year college, to get into trades.
So I appreciate all of the work that you're doing in rebuilding not just your Indigenous community, but you've planted a lot of seeds for other communities. As I mentioned earlier, when my brother met you at the Old Pueblo hemp workshop in Arizona, he had that same kind of impact like I did. He's like, cannot unsee this, must build with hemp. And he was actually in the process of building, his own project. And so I was just thinking of that in the context of role models. While you have all of these young people that are looking up to you, the notion of role model in our communities is very fluid. We have elders that look down to our young people for the innovative work that they're doing, and so you are, as a junior elder, if you will, have a lot of other elders that look across to you, because I don't want to say look down to you, but they look across to you in the work that you're doing. So in 2026, my brother was like, well, 2025, he said, I'm building with hemp. I don't care what it takes. And so he started, his project site, and he's just been super lit up about it. I think in pretty much all of his free time, he's doing research on what he needs to do. So I share that with you to say, don't ever, think of like role models and young people looking up to you. You got a lot of, I think you just shared that with the work that you did. You just really had this like love towards the vision that young people have and what they share with you during those workshops. Um, and there's been, I think, a lot of healing work that's been done with the sharing of story and in our Indigenous communities. The revitalization of hemp has definitely showed, that opportunity. And we see that in the work that you do, specifically with the film Green Buffalo. There's, I think, for me, a really impactful moment that you share in there, where you're walking through a cemetery and you're seeing all of your childhood friends, um, in that place and setting, as opposed to being on your build team. So I can imagine that the work that you're doing, and some of the share stories that you share, is like giving people in your community that why. Then I think back about your role, as a role model, as a father. I can imagine there's times that you have to be harsh with your son or your children, and tell them things, and their friends are like, we don't hear that, we don't have anybody holding us accountable, in that fashion. And so, when I think about your role as a builder, it can probably consume. Everybody knows of Danny as, this amazing hemp builder that's, bringing homes to his community. But then I think about what you had shared with us earlier. You've got your hemp building workshop, and then you've got this amazing opportunity to revitalize Indigenous Native Hawaiian communities after impactful and devastating fires there, which means you're going to be away from your family to go and help serve other communities. Um, can you share a little bit about how you are able to kind of maintain that balance? Because I've seen you in your light. You're an amazing father. You've got beautiful children, including your wonderful little daughter. How do you find that balance with such a purpose-driven work that you're doing?
Well, it is just having that support from my family, and having, such beautiful children and a wife that is supportive of me, doing all of this work. And, I try, and any time that I can, I'm at, my kids' sport events, or spending time with them. It's all with the family. So, um, but it's hard to balance, actually. I mean, it is a lot of work, and I do get pulled in a lot of directions. And I try to make myself as available as possible. So when people reach out, I'm open to talking or working with anybody, and I think that is why we've gotten so much, you know, um, attention, or other types of um, collaborations, is just because I have been so open to working with anybody and just being so available. I don't want to be like a gatekeeper or whatever. I think we run into a lot of that. We've been open to having all tribes or any community come and work with us. And I was on stage in Utah a couple months ago at the Ivory Innovations Summit, the Ivory Prize Summit, and that was one of the questions they asked, was who is the most unexpected partners that you've came across in your work. And I brought up the city of Redwood Falls and the community of Redwood Falls, and how um, having that community come to us and want us to help them rebuild their community. It's like a full circle, a moment for me, personally, but also as our communities together. And so it's really just not just building community, but like expanding it throughout. So I think just like things like that, that happen in the background while all of this work is going on, is just what really makes it that much easier to keep answering my phone or emails, or when anybody calls. I do whatever I can to give them all the help that I can. So, like, same with your brother, or anybody that wants to get building, because I know our community needs it. I know other communities need it, and I see the potential, and I see that this, it's not going to solve all the problems, but this is a huge. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to push it out there as wide and as fast as I can, and I heard some quote, it said something about, like, when you're creating a trail, or when you're blazing a trail, or whatever. I don't remember how the quote goes exactly, but it says you should, make sure that path is wide enough for people to follow. You shouldn't just be creating that path for yourself. And so that's really what we're doing, is we're making sure that while we're doing this, we're bringing everyone along, and we're making this path wide enough for everyone to come with us. So.
That's absolutely what I've loved about watching this journey, is that you have been doing just that. Blazing the trail, and lighting it up so others could come behind, or being so intentional and realizing that there's a lot of other tribal communities and non-tribal communities that are watching this work, but then to take it to that next step and be able to, create the career and the workforce development, planning or that framework so that the young people can learn, or, the young people curriculum so that they can get into the dirt. That work that you're doing with the young people, like building those relationships, not, through building and through growing, but you're building relationships so that, the next generation won't have the same type of contentious political relationships that we may have experienced, and definitely not the ones that Earl experienced when he was probably, a young father, or, a young mentor starting along this pathway in Minnesota. I feel like that's, that bigger part of the work that we do, but I know what you're talking about, that sense of urgency, like we've got to get it done now.
Yeah, it definitely is. I feel desperate, or I feel like when people aren't helping this along, I'm like, get the hell out of the way, like we got to get this done right now. Like, what are we waiting for, And so that's kind of been my whole mindset this whole time. So it is really just, it's frustrating for sure, but it's, we're moving the right direction. We're on the right trajectory. We're taking the baby steps right now, and hopefully pretty soon we'll start taking some larger steps, and then before you know it, we'll be running with this thing.
What you shared earlier is something that I have had the experience of discussing with a lot of the tribal hemp and cannabis communities across the country. Is when you have the opportunity to get people in the soil, working with their hands, healing in the soil, that trend, or that marker is there. And then I think about the opportunity that we have now to reshape things for our young people. That's what I'm really excited about for a lot of our young people, but also finding that shift and that balance as well, though, because education is important. It's a tool to have in your tool belt, but it's not the only tool. And there's so many ways about acquiring that education, in our pathway, in our walk. Well, thank you so much, Danny, for sharing so much about your journey. I also realize that you understand the importance of that role, of being a positive male role model for other men across the country, across the world, in doing this work. And I just appreciate, that you know that it is a great responsibility. I hear that in how you speak about it. But on behalf of Her Many Voices Foundation, and the Gaia Gossip podcast, thank you so much for sharing your story, and lighting the pathway for others to be able to follow.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again for joining us at Her Many Voices Gaia Gossip. Remember, whatever you do for another, you do for yourself. For more information, head over to hermanyvoices.org to learn more about other programs and get involved. From all of us at Gaia Gossip and Her Many Voices Foundation, thank you, and until next time.